Hey, this is Elizabeth Plouffe. It's Entrepreneurial Entrails, and it's been a while, but things have been crazy busy, and it's just been a while. So, welcome to Entrepreneurial Entrails, and this is sort of a combo deal with Entrepreneurial Entrails and Ballsy in Review. And Ballsy is the entrepreneurship group that I've founded over a year ago, for women in business in the Halton area. And luckily, I reached out to a friend of mine and her partner who runs Silicon Halton's Women in Tech, and asked them if they wanted to partner, which was fantastic. So a lot of partnering going on. And last night we had an amazing Women in Tech session, and Hazel Van de Verken, who owns and runs Making Change Happen, ran a terrific little workshop on the experimentation mindset. And I found it really empowering for quite a few reasons, but I'm going to share with you some of the chief highlights that I got out of it. Can't see it very well, but behind me I wrote out some stuff just so that I would have some interesting stuff in the background. But I also took some notes, which I'm going to share with you, and I like to do kind of colorful sketch noting. I don't know how well that's showing up. But so here's some of the things. When you're an entrepreneur, and I don't know what the average would be between men and women, but it can be really challenging within your business to understand the difference between iteration and experimentation, and making sure that there's a balance between how much experimentation you're doing for your business and how much is iteration. So using an existing idea and just tweaking it a little, or taking something that is probably a bit outlandish and running with it as an experiment. And I think I've talked about this before, because back in June, Spark the Change Toronto, I've been on that team for 3 years. Sami Paju came in from Finland, and just he said a terrific thing that sort of changed my mentality around business, which is people often mistake good ideas or bad ideas for bad experiments. And he explained it much better than I'm explaining it to you now, but hopefully going over Hazel's notes, it'll be a lot clearer. And it really empowered me to think about taking chances for my business a lot differently. And so last night, Hazel kicked off, and she talked about the experimentation mindset. And I have to look down and read my notes a little bit here too. And using small experiments that are low cost and low risk to build confidence to continue experimenting is one of the big things. But here's what she talked about as far as the process. And again, it's up behind me. You just can't see it very well. Sorry about that. So experimentation mindset. Oh, if you're listening to the podcast, sorry, I'm doing video at the same time. So know your purpose, make failure acceptable, think big, act small, be intolerant of mediocrity or mediocrity, and keep experimenting. And it was interesting to go through that and listen to the conversation and how everybody interpreted that. And of course, for an agile practitioner or an agile coach, typically you're going into an organization. So as a solopreneur, taking these lessons on can mean something a little different to you. And one of the things I think most people need to remember when it comes to an experimentation mindset and trying small things for their business is that the time spent experimenting doesn't necessarily have to have a numeric ROI or monetary ROI. And the data that you collect from doing these small experiments might be considered intangible if you don't have a metric you can apply to it, but it's incalculable, the benefits that you can get out of this. So you get ideas for new experiments, you reduce your fear of failure so that you continue to try so that your business can grow. And if you are part of a team, then it can become a team building exercise, which is really beneficial for your organization overall. And so one of the other things that we touched on was changing the organizational mindset. And if you're a solopreneur and your goal is to eventually hire staff, then it's good to learn these things now because you can implement them right away. And if you yourself are taking the opportunity as a solopreneur to do small experiments, tweaking your products and services, reaching out in a different way, trying new, I do communications for businesses, so supporting businesses in trying new communications tools. One of the things, make sure that failure is good and expected and accepted, and it's almost a bad thing if you don't fail now and again. change the ROI and pick metrics that are not necessarily financially motivated so that you can see the benefits beyond the immediate impact on your bottom line. Accepting opportunity for lessons. So if you go through that experiment, take the time to do a retrospective so that you see what's happened and move forward properly. There's all kinds of stuff. And I think two of the biggest things that came out of this for me were if you are in an organization, keep in mind that people are coming into your organization with different experiences of failure and experimentation. And my example was, from a very early age, I was told to sit down and shut up and be quiet. And I'm naturally a talkative, inquisitive person, have been from a very, very young age. And so, in a sense, those were experiments in class, offering your opinion, trying to contribute to discussions and what have you. And when you are consistently told to sit down, shut up, and be quiet, you learn to do that. You stop having the mindset of trying to continue to engage in the conversation, and you just stop. So I eventually got over that, yay, as you can tell, and now I do small experiments. Sorry, that was my phone. That's not great. So the Dreyfus model of skills acquisition was another thing that was really impactful from last night, and I'm sorry if you're watching the video. I know this is rude, but I just want to make sure that that doesn't bother us again. And again, terrific notes that I got from Hazel last night. I'll take some images and share with you. So the Dreyfus model of skills acquisition talks about the steps you need to take to go from novice to advanced beginner to competent to proficient to expert. And any kind of solopreneur, for me anyway, I'll speak from my own experience. I really struggle with being called an expert. It is not a title that I am comfortable with, and not so much because I'm not good at what I do, but because I could never tell anybody that I have learned everything I need to learn about communications and social media and what I can do for businesses. There's always going to be somebody who knows something different than me. There's always going to be new information to find. There's always going to be opportunity to learn. So to call myself an expert, I find very limiting, because that means there's nothing else to learn, and that's never true. And what ended up happening is that it's okay to be proficient. Proficient means you know your stuff and you are able to teach and do and execute on what you have. What makes you an expert is your willingness to experiment with your knowledge and your experience so that you can individualize and customize what you're doing for a client or an organization. And that's what makes you an expert, is that comfortableness. I don't even know if that's a word, but anyway, that comfortableness with saying, you know what, this is how I've normally done it. This is where my experience and my expertise lies, but let's try it this way. And, you know, I'm okay constructing this experiment around my existing proficiency within a skill to try and do this. And that was huge for me. That was major, that I don't have to be an expert. Being proficient is enough. And being willing to experiment with my proficiencies is what makes me an expert. That level of comfort with that, which is huge. And we went on and we talked about the single loop and double loop process when you're evaluating experiments. You know, when you just take a single loop or a single pass by, then you sort of end up missing details that a double loop of going back and evaluating could provide for you, which was major. And what she actually opened up with, sorry, I'm looking away, but I've got to read my notes. What she actually opened up with was talking about what does the experimentation mindset mean to you? What could be any background issues that you're having around that experimentation mindset? How do you make it comfortable for people to do this? And, you know, back in the day, there was the program of trial and error. And I have an inherent gut reaction to pulling back from that, because that very title of trial and error implies inherent failure no matter what you do. So if you are looking within your organization or with your own business or what have you to do new things, then the value of referencing them as experiments allows for a hypothesis, so the idea of what you want to try, but it allows for both success and failure, which I think is huge to everybody's comfort level on trying new things, whether, again, it's yourself or a team. So that's one of the many things I found really powerful. And Hazel did a fantastic job on facilitating the discussion, and would really suggest, and I'll post her contact information, I'd really suggest getting in touch with her. And if your team is struggling taking on new tasks, and especially with a smaller team, you want to start when it's small so it's easier to manage. You get to that critical tipping point between 80 and 120 employees. And it's harder to correct at that point. If you haven't created a culture within your organization that allows for experimentation and failure, and allows for people to come to you with new suggestions, and trust that you're not going to lose your shit when they offer these things, fixing it later, not great. So one of the last things was, look at it as a frontier mindset, Star Trek, if you will, last frontier, boldly go. It's a really good thing to look into. It's a really good thing to learn more about, this experimentation mindset. And one of the things I wrote down, I have to turn around and look. I shared that already. We're good. Just remember, if you're hesitating and calling yourself an expert in your industry, that's okay. You don't have to call yourself an expert in your industry. There's ways around that. But what makes you an expert in your industry is being very confident in your proficiencies and your skills so that you can experiment and do the right thing for your client. So that's the entrepreneurial entrail Ballsy combo today. Ballsy, if you're in the Halton area and you're a woman in business, specifically a woman entrepreneur, then we meet on the first Wednesday of every month. We meet at Pane Fresco, Locust Street here in Burlington. And one of the reasons we chose that was we experimented for 4 months, trying different locations, trying different setups, looking at different menus, looking at all kinds of things that would facilitate the best conversation, make it easiest for people to come, and what have you. It took us 4 months to find Pane Fresco and make that decision and commitment. It was a great experiment. And we did that before we officially launched a year ago this month. And now, based on what we've learned, the first year of Ballsy was in fact a bit of an experiment, and finding out what people wanted to do, when they wanted to meet, if the breakfast experiment was going to work. And now we're moving forward with a new experiment. We're introducing an accountability program, and Holly Simmons, who's one of our fantastic members, she's a John C. Maxwell certified coach, and she's a family mediator. She's all kinds of great stuff. And I approached Holly to take on the role of facilitating and creating this program and implementing it. And we're going to be, I call it the no bullshit program, but that doesn't really roll off the tongue. So we're trying to still come up with a great name for that. But it's an experiment. I think it's going to be a great experiment. I think we're going to have success with this experiment, but it's an experiment nonetheless. And that's because after a year of Ballsy, we're comfortable in our proficiencies to do that experiment. So I strongly encourage you to investigate this experimental mindset and get more comfortable with it and see what pennies drop for you so that you can move forward with stuff for your business. And again, come on out to Ballsy. We are on the web. You can check us out there. My name's Elizabeth Plouffe. I own MCV Communications, and what I do, because I got asked this last night, which is so sad that I'm not being as clear as I should be around that. Ironic for a communications person. So I teach small businesses the best ways to communicate for their business. I shorten the learning process so they can get back to work faster, and I save them money because they're not investing in things that aren't good for their business, and they're not wasting time on things that aren't good for their business for communications, social media, and all that good stuff. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter, MCV Comms and MCV Communications for those, and Facebook and all kinds of good stuff. So check in and see what we're up to. And I thank you. I thank you for experimenting if this is your first time listening to Entrepreneurial Entrails. And I hope we chat again, and we'll see what new topics come up. Thank you so much. I hope you're having a great day. Bye-bye.